Hello, our truth warriors. As always, we're asking you to share this interview, like the video, and if you think it was good, give us the feedback. Let us know what you're thinking, seeing, and hearing out there. Now, today's guest is a warrior on another level who has stood his ground against the odds to stand in his truth. We last spoke back in July of 2022, which is a milestone podcast number 100, and I'll put the link into the show notes so you can see that one. His view has never wavered and has continued to give absolutely incredible evidence on how your healthcare is failing you. Apart from his qualifications as a doctor and his medical expertise, he's a really nice bloke. So I'm glad to see him back with us again once more. Dr. Dave Cartland, how are you, sir?
No, thank you for that. Just, big billing really, but I disagree with you slightly from the outset. I'm not a warrior or a hero or any of that. I'm just a doctor doing my job, to be honest with you. And I don't see why other people don't see it that way, that it's their moral, ethical duty, professional code of conduct to do as I have. And sadly, you can probably count on about two hands the amount of doctors that have stood up and vocalised their concerns whilst letting the patients and children and pregnant patients getting jabbed left, right, and centre and being harmed and being gaslit, and about 9 of them have been struck off, and I'm probably the last one standing. Another good colleague has just had to relinquish his licence because he just doesn't want all the hell I'm about to face with my military grade tribunal for calling out doctors in the UK.
Yeah, ridiculous. I mean, last time we spoke, you were on a suspension from the health authority. I mean, please tell us now, did they reinstate you? What's the current status of where you are?
Yeah, that was, I've got to be careful what I said because I had to do an NDA in the end. So I'll keep it brief as I basically got kicked out of my hospital because I refused to wear a mask despite a negative test, it being a boiling hot day, having had 2 vaccines, as you know, and been quite unwell with them actually in the not so recent past. But no, unfortunately, there's a legal battle there, and I lost actually. The negative test wasn't enough to, and they suspended me on a certain number of days, but not others. So COVID's very clever as it knows which building you're in and floats right on by the old homeless health centre that I worked in, but attacks you directly in the face if you're in the urgent care centre. That's probably about all I can say without
very stealthy. Very stealthy. Now, the evidence to prove the dangers of taking the safe and effective is beyond ignorable now. How's the medical system now addressing this? Has there been any softening? Has there been any change, or is it still very hard line that this is good for you?
Well, I've had a little dabble back in the NHS this last 3 months over Christmas, mainly to pay for legal fees, sadly, for litigations, etc. I've got a target on my back, but yeah, I mean, people are as blasé about it and as blind, and I call it ostrich syndrome. You've got to remember these doctors now have not only received umpteen vaccines and are jabbed up to the eyeballs now, but they've also got that complicity in that, A, they didn't show due diligence and do the research, and secondly, they've jabbed everything with a pulse. And the fact that being born wasn't even a factor because they were going for pregnant moms. So, I've still not had a conversation with the doctor. I've tried to send, even this very moment before we come on this interview, some information to a doctor who repeatedly says to me, this you've chose a hill to die on here that wasn't worth dying on. And I was like, I can't understand that when we're talking about a Christian individual saying that, the genocide of world's population isn't a hill to die on, harming kids and pregnant women, at the very least, we can agree on is a hill to die on. But yeah, what are the doctors doing? They're doing not a lot. They're gaslighting their patients. This very morning, Chris, I've had 4 vaccine injuries after an interview I did in Australia this morning. And the stories are identical, absolutely identical. They've gone to their doctor a very short time frame after the vaccine. They develop X, Y, and Z symptoms, whatever those symptoms may be. They get told it's absolutely not the vaccine, despite the temporal relationship. And just get gaslit. And most of them end up with antidepressants being thrown at them. Functional neurological disorder is a diagnosis at the moment that basically you're making it up for the fun of it. You're making up your fecal incontinence. You're making up the fact you can't walk. You're making up your memory issues and your global amnesic episodes, and for the fun of it, essentially. And it just goes on and on. Look, I can't explain my colleagues' behaviour. It really is quite hard to explain, other than it's multifactorial, isn't it? It's as I mentioned, the complicity, the fact that they're probably sick themselves and realizing that doctors who've, it's almost like a bittersweet told you so, isn't it?
Yeah.
And on top of that, they took the money for it. They've not kept up to date with evidence practice. And, as soon as they start shining a light by filling in these reports for yellow cards and making the links. Now, I would say this, the patients are making this link now. It's not the doctors. They're realizing that they're seeing a lot more hearses lately. They're seeing a lot more of their neighbours' obituaries in the local newspaper. They're seeing direct relatives, friends and family affected. And like I said at the beginning, this is only going to end, unfortunately, when we reach a critical mass of death, suffering, disability. And we're seeing that with the excess mortality data across the world. It's a worldwide phenomenon. The MPs in the UK are trying to put it down to lockdowns and access to healthcare. That doesn't wash, I'm afraid, because it's actually not the age groups that would be affected that way. Of course, it contributes. Of course, people not going to the hospital because they were too busy TikTok dancing, and so the public perception of the TikTok dancing doctors were, the doctors are so busy, don't want to trouble them with that rectal bleed that I've had for 6 weeks. Of course, that's going to affect, because by the time they're diagnosed, it's progressed and they're palliative. So there is a small element, but it's the 20 to 40-year-olds that are dying in the UK data, and no one's come up with any sort of hypothesis other than to heckle our wonderful MP Andrew Bridgen, who has, I don't know how he does it, to be honest. He stands alone with one or two others and gets little taps on the shoulders from the tea lady and the security saying, your job's good and you're doing really well. But on the whole, I don't know if you saw my kind offer to the MPs of the UK this week to offer to vaccinate them with the safe and effective spring booster 2024 on camera with a publicly circulating vaccine, not a Pfizer special. And you can count on 0 fingers how many people have come forward for my kind offer. Funny that I know a lot of these MPs for facts haven't been vaccinated.
No,
and still they all won't speak out. So what have people got on these MPs that keeps them quiet in such a scenario? But we can but speculate.
No, that's it. And despite those that are more concerned about the payments on the BMW and the mortgage on the new house that they've just bought, you've been a beacon of light for many people. And I'm hoping since we last spoke that you've received much more support from your fellow colleagues as well as other medical staff. Is this really happening though?
Yeah, I'd say we're finding each other in the world. We're dotted about here, there, and everywhere. So we've connected with the world's doctors. Have connected. We're in contact with each other. The awake. I hate that phrase awake because it is what it is. But yeah, we've found each other. We're trying to find solutions to better healthcare outside of the regulatory capture of things like the NHS and the restrictions of GMC. And one thing I'd say about the colleagues that are in that waking up zone at the moment, that it's accelerating. So I put a video out, I don't know if you saw it, 7 minutes, just sporadically took the camera, recorded myself saying what I saw, went viral, millions of views, and it's attracted a lot of attention. But one of the things I'd say from that video, and the reason for it, was to call out doctors to stand with me, stand with me finally in 2024 now. If we stand together, stick to facts, stick to data, science is settled now. These things are, unsafe and defective, not safe and effective, and stand together. And so I've had about 300 messages in the last week, and doctors, nurses, dentists, physios, paramedics, silently but agreeing with me, and at least giving me that reassurance I've not lost the plot, and said that they're seeing it in their A&Es, they're seeing it in their ambulance trucks, that they're seeing young people with strokes and heart attacks, and people personally affected. Somebody from NHS England told me that they'd had myopericarditis after their from a very senior position, and she knew it was a vaccine, and said even in her office space there's people dropping down and relatives dropping down of people within the office, and it's kind of building up in momentum now. And even on my last call, somebody just told me about 10 people in their direct family circle, friend circle, that have either got cancer, incurable cancer, or died in the last 12 months now. That needs some explanation, doesn't it? Or at least look at the factors involved. But the one thing doctors are certain of, it's not the vaccine. It never is the vaccine. But they don't postulate a potential outside of that. So how could it possibly be a novel gene-based immunomodulatory treatment that's lipid nanoparticles, for example, never been used in humans ever outside of a clinical trial, and when they have been used in a clinical trial on animals, the animals didn't do too well.
No.
And straight to the human arm of a 6-month-old. We went down as low as 6-month-old in the UK. How sick is that?
Well, as well as trying to get them before they're even born, as you say, it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, I believe the chances of any doctor actually seeing, you mentioned there pericarditis, but I believe that the chances of a doctor actually seeing pericarditis could be as low as once in a career, or maybe none at all. How is that increase looking now, and how can it be ignored?
Well, it can't be. That's what I'm saying. But if you've got your head in the sand, you're not going to see what's right in front of you, are you? And that's what's going on. That's this sort of deniability, cognitive dissonance. And, people have spoken out in the awake doctor contingent that have said, pre-COVID and even during the COVID peaks, they weren't seeing myopericarditis, to use that example. But as soon as a vaccine touched the arm, then they're getting, the desks piled high with case notes of young people that have had the vaccine and they've got myopericarditis. So, these autoimmune conditions that are as rare as hen's teeth, loads of them, infertility, like even in the last 3 months in the NHS, loads of young chaps have had 3 or 4 vaccines, azoospermia, women having irregular periods, blood clots in young people, have had a stroke in a 30-year-old, told it was long COVID, even though it was a week after Moderna. I mean, the gaslighting is on steroids at the moment. And I keep using the analogy, Chris, of murdering. No, I'm not a murderer by nature, but if I imagine that I murdered somebody, what I would do is 2 things: deny it and hide the evidence. And this is what we're seeing now. This is, tantamount to, as far as I'm concerned, I call it what it is. It's murder.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. We've interviewed quite a few doctors over the past few years, and one of the doctors that we interviewed was an emergency doctor, and he said, he would go and do a shift, and he'd see 3 or 4 people come in with pericarditis. It's just like, something that you would never see, and all of a sudden the emergency room, and this is going back it's going back 3 years, and I imagine it's got no better since. But it just absolutely astounds me that
if you pulled any doctor, Chris, now, if you pulled any doctor, go into any surgery and pulled them quietly, no recording, asked them privately and offered not to repeat it, non-disclosure, they will tell you what they're seeing, but they're petrified. I had a message that was quite alarming. I shared it again on Twitter yesterday saying we're petrified. Not only are they petrified for the gains of their job, the pension, the cars, and you're caught in this perpetual loop of debt, and you set a lifestyle for yourself as a doctor, so you have to keep plowing away at it, and that gets you into that slave mentality. But they're petrified because of the so-called NHS protecting the whistleblower. They call it freedom to speak up, guardianship. I mean, they're taking the piss, really. Excuse my language. I mean, if you do speak up, you're out the door. And these people are petrified, literally, and they won't speak out. And they're doing things subtle now, so they'll have conversations in the coffee room. It's too late for subtlety. They're documenting in the notes, like when they take the history. They're adding of how many COVID vaccines in there, subtle. So they're not saying anything like, I think it is to do with the vaccine, but they're just making a little flag up that this person has had 5 jabs. And even only yesterday, I got an email from a radiologist who had just scanned a lady who'd had a bleed on her brain. And he heard the conversation between consultants. This was just a sort of radiology assistant, and emailed me anonymously and said, the conversation was, there's nothing that's changed in this person's life other than they had the vaccine yesterday and they're in with a brain bleed today. I mean, it's the first time I got called an anti-vaxxer when I said that a chap had had the AstraZeneca jab and then got the clot the day after. The day after, and the doctor said to me, "What are you an anti-vaxxer, Dr. Carter?" I said, "Nobody had the AstraZeneca yesterday, and today's got cerebral venous thrombosis. What's the chances of that?" He said, "No, it's because of his maxillary sinus inflammation in his cheeks that has caused the brain clot." Some coincidence is going on at the minute. Yet I can't prove my vaccine injury, and the people that are accusing me of vaccine injury and correlation isn't causation and all that jazz, they're the same people who are telling people who've had a stroke a week after the jab, and it was from asymptomatic. They've even thrown that in now. So they're saying it's from a long COVID, from an infection you never even knew you had in some cases. So a Guillain-Barré, that was a lady who'd lost use and sensation in her legs. And I said, "What are the doctors here telling you is the cause of it?" "Oh, asymptomatic long COVID." I mean, I can't even explain what that even means. No. Your paralysis is from an infection manifesting some months down the line, from an infection you didn't even know you had. The deadly disease test for.
It absolutely insults the intelligence. I mean, I'm not a medically qualified. I know enough through family. All my family have been, nurses and pharmacists and stuff like that over the years. So I've picked a few things up. But even not being a doctor, I'm seeing on social media and friends and people that I know and friends of friends, I'm seeing people I know suffer blood clots. Some make it to the hospital in time, and some are becoming a casualty, dying suddenly. And if I am noticing this increase, what are you seeing?
even just this last hour, I've spoken to, and they don't mind me sharing this story. Though, in fact, I'm going to interview some of these vaccine injured that aren't on the radar of the public eye at the moment. These are the real cases, and I've had a guy who had 20 strokes after his, and these were recorded on a scan after his second AstraZeneca. He'd even had a stroke after his first. The ladies I've just spoken to, again, they wouldn't mind me sharing, but the poor lady had what was alleged to be COVID. She had a test. She had a flu-like illness. She was sick with it, with breathlessness, etc. Went in. So to all intents and purposes, let's say for the want of the argument, she recovered from COVID. She's an amputee. And as an amputee, she had to have some further surgery on her below knee amputation. It wasn't to do with the vaccine. That was before. The surgeon had said to her, and I quote, as they just said to me, is that we won't be giving you, bearing in mind she's just had COVID and recovered and had this conspiracy theory called natural immunity, only months before that, we will not operate on your leg unless you have the COVID vaccine. I mean, if anyone can explain that, a further revelation, doctors at my recent 2 or 3 surgeries refusing the jab. They're flat refusing to have any more after conversations with me usually. They have a bit of a eureka moment, but they're still giving it to the patients.
Yeah.
If anyone can reconcile how that's not ethically abhorrent and disgusting behaviour, that these doctors aren't being held to account yet. I'm going to a tribunal in October, likely to be struck off.
Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous. It is. I'm part of a group. I actually got invited to a group by Dr. Peter McCulloch, and he has an email group, and I get probably maybe 5 or 6, maybe more emails a day from different doctors around the world saying exactly, they're speaking up and saying what they're finding. Are you part of that group, or do you want me to kind of get you a little bit of an introduction to that?
Yeah, happy to. I'm like I say, I never say no to connecting with like-minded. Yeah. I mean, I know Peter as well, Peter McCulloch. We're all connected, really. We do, Mike Yeadon, etc. All the awake doctors. We're all finding sanity in each other because, out in the real world of NHS, it is literally. I don't know if these people are just stupid or they've got too many prions in their brain at the moment from the mRNA. But I'm seeing in my colleagues there's cognitive changes in them now. They're not the same doctors they were, not only from an ethical perspective, but physically looking at them, they look more aged. The shakes, they've got the shakes, they're forgetting things. So you see in the notes when they're writing in the notes, they're making spelling mistakes and making really weird clinical decisions. So, I've called this prion disease thing out for a while. I'm seeing it. And unfortunately, that along with the fact we know that the vaccine causes microvascular coagulation, that we're going to start seeing in our friends, family and doctors cognitive behavioural issues. And with that comes memory, behaviour. I've seen apathy, like people just don't care about anything. I've seen the opposite end where they're eccentric and aggressive. That's the only way to describe it. Amongst colleagues, you'll say, oh, Dr. Jones, I couldn't just show you this article about X, Y, and Z, and fuck off, I don't listen to your conspiracy theories. Excuse my language, but I'm quoting the doctor. And it's just out of it. If a doctor comes up and says, can I just share this concern, and you tell them to F off, it's just not what doctors don't speak to each other like that.
No.
So I'm seeing evidence of this. So watch this space.
Professional, as you say. Now, what if the people, the healthcare professionals, the nurses, the doctors, what if they actually did something that would force the hand of a union? Now, the union for the nurses and doctors doesn't seem to be doing anything to help the doctors and people who are in the positions of speaking out. But what if, rather than people voice, those who are afraid to speak out, just literally severed the ties to the union and stopped paying the dues, which meant the union was no longer funded, but the people did turn around to the union and say, you start backing us properly, you start speaking out on our behalf and putting pressure into the system, otherwise this money isn't coming back to you. And that could literally put the nurses union out of business. Would that be something you think that could work?
Yeah, but you need enough numbers to do it. That's the problem. People don't want to rock the boat. People are, I was talking in an earlier interview about how you're kind of actively selected out as a doctor through medical school to not critically think. I've had the benefit of 2 degrees where the 1 degree taught me to critically think, the scientific degree, and critically appraise and question and don't take what's published in articles as gospel. However, the medics are just conditioned to follow the crowd. It's groupthink. These are the lectures, these are the conditions, these are the drugs that you give for every condition. Nothing given to nutrition and hygiene and all the rest of it, and exercise. It's all about drugs and more drugs. So we're in a position where the nurses are similar as well. It's we need a critical mass of doctors, and that I don't think that's a big number. To be honest, I don't think it's a big number, but I can count on two hands the doctors who've spoken out, and 8 or 9 of them have been struck off or suspended. So it's not a great advert, and that's what the feedback's been from these 300 doctors of the last few weeks, saying that we've got our excuses around financial obligations. However, the big one is we've seen what they've done to you. We've seen what they've done to Ahmad Malik. We've seen what they've done to, Sarah Myhill and Anne McCloskey and Jane Donegan in the UK. I was only speaking to on a podcast this morning with a chap who's been, again, he's been persecuted from day one, all for calling out informed consent, lockdowns, masks, and patient safety concerns, which on another planet that would be a genuinely normal thing for a doctor to do, but not on planet Earth in 2020 to 2024. What's going on, I don't know.
I think what's so frustrating is the evidence is there to prove everything that you're standing behind. And it's the fact that it's being ignored is unbelievable. It's like, don't pull the curtain back, don't look behind the curtain kind of thing. It's the evidence is there and it's irrefutable. And many people out there in the world are seeing this now. And if they're seeing it, I know for certain that the people within the medical profession are actually seeing it as well. What do you think it's going to take to get them to speak out? Is there something that people have in mind that's going to ease the pressure and allow people to feel comfortable to say, hey, listen, I've gone along with it so long because, it's going to affect my life financially. I always hear, I've got kids in college, I've got a mortgage, I've got this. But, that to me is still no excuse when basically there's mass genocide going on around them. But what do you think it's going to take to really turn the tide, to get people to feel strong enough in the convictions, to put everything else aside and say, enough is enough, we need to make a change now?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the riddle we've all got to solve. And if I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't be begging them on videos and just saying, please, guys, And my point is, if you're in the job to, protect your kids' private education and your Mercedes-Benz, then you're in the wrong career. But we're seeing this in medicine. We're seeing it in politicians. They're career politicians now. They're there for their own ego and self-promotion. Same with doctors, and doctors are actively selected again as being, egocentric, God complex, all the characteristics of a good senior clinician, really. And I don't think we can crack the case for these people. We do need that critical mass. I keep saying, I think the end of it is also going to come down to 3 things. It's going to come down to the continued ill health of the vaccinated and people dropping, and people noticing these funeral hearses and ambulances whizzing by, and backed up by the excess mortality, which is the second point. And the third point is the control group. The people who never touched this with a barge pole haven't got these blood clots and strokes and heart attacks and strange autoimmune multisystemic inflammatory conditions. So it's a really simple tip for all my colleagues is ask your patient how many they've had. It's really simple, really effective, really quick way of screening. How many did they have? You'll soon start seeing that the trend is that all of these azoospermic, neuroinflamed, cognitively impaired, blood clot filled, menstrual issue patients that you see, I've got one thing in common, and it's to do with messenger RNA for COVID-19 spike protein being pumped into their body. I looked the other day, Chris, at the dose, what they give you in an AstraZeneca jab, and it really alarmed me, the sheer number. So they gave people into their arm in a 0.5 ml of syringe, 0.5 ml of liquid, 250 billion infectious units, billion in a 0.5 ml. Of inactivated monkey adenoviral vector. 6 months later, we get monkeypox into the world. Do they think we're stupid? I mean, how do you inactivate all that number of viruses in a small amount of fluid across how many vials? It's impossible, aside from the fact they did it at the speed of science, So they're going to cut corners, and there's going to be quality control issues. And I think that's some of the batch issues that we see. It's just that they've sped it through so that they could, get printing the money as quick as possible.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, people who are super fit, famous sports players and athletes, these ultra runners, they're dropping during events. I mean, I've watched, and I've also competed myself over the years. I've never ever seen anything like this. I might have seen somebody with cramp pull up or whatever. Is the clear evidence coming forward from the likes of the autopsies or medical examinations that are showing that this is definitely linked to what they've taken, as opposed to, what the the effects have been. You know, I understand if somebody has a heart attack based on this, it's probably very difficult for them to pinpoint exactly that it's something that they've taken. But is there anything coming out from autopsies and medical examinations now that further reinforces what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, two aspects to the answer really to that is I'm a sports fan myself. I'm watching, you know, a lot of probably too many football matches at the weekend, and you know, it happens every week. There's either an event in the crowd. You know, even stewards are contacting me at the moment. What you don't see when the camera pans off and said, "Look, player down" or "manning the crowd down," there's other events. They're getting loads of medical calls to come to this patient in Rose Ed or whatever. So it's happening even off camera as well. So it's even worse than we're seeing when it actually is a player collapsing on the pitch, like the Luton lad. In the Bournemouth game recently, had his second event on the pitch, Adam Lockyer. You know, and what I'd say in terms of, I mean, so we're not stupid. I mean, I've watched a lot of football. Matt Le Tissier is the one who spoke out as an ex-professional with bravery and honour. And
Matt
you know,
a few times
what does he he gets kicked off Sky Sports to be replaced by Clinton Morrison. So you know that's what's going on, and so you know you get called a conspiracy theorist. There was another hit piece on him only a few days ago about Matt Le Tissier is bringing out conspiracy theories about the jab again. No. We were all watching, you know, golfers falling down with clutching their putters on the green. The tennis players coming off. There was one match the other day, the fourth seed, that came off and said, "Oh, I've not been right since the jab," and you caught it on the audio. You caught him, and this is high elite sports. And going back to your original question about studies. Yeah, there are. There are people who are doing studies. I'll name one example, a chap called now deceased, funnily enough, found drowned in a family incident, is what the report said. However, he was doing case series on post-mortems of people that had died suddenly and found that they had brains, hearts, testes pickled with spike protein, infiltrating the tissues thereof. And he was showing work that the endothelium, the blood vessel lining, had lit up like a Christmas tree when you cared to stain it for the spike protein. But unfortunately, I mean, I've had the unfortunate job of going to a post-mortem of a lady who died within a matter of days of the second COVID jab. She was really sick after the first. Post-mortem we did, they just wanted me to observe as a sort of sane mind to check there weren't any shenanigans. And this poor lady, they opened her up, disease everywhere, absolutely riddled with disease. I won't go into the details too much, but you know, I asked the coroner who was preparing the post-mortem histology, are we going to be, you know, staining this for spike protein, and laughed originally, like I was telling a joke. It's like, no, I mean, genuinely, this is a potential vaccine injury case from AstraZeneca. And he wouldn't, and he said, we don't do that in the UK. So we're never going to get the solutions if we're not testing for, you know, post-mortem obviously is a bit too late for the patient, but, you know, they were quick enough to come up with a vaccine. So let's get a validated spike protein test that discerns, you know, natural COVID in inverted commas versus, you know, a spike protein that's been produced. They've got the construct, they've got the genetic sequence for it. So it shouldn't be that difficult to do a test in vivo, but that'll be the house of cards gone then. The closest I'm doing at the moment is getting auto antibodies on patients that are being told they're making it up. And then they go back to their neurologist with a checkmate and say, well, how do you explain the fact I've got all these new antibodies against my own tissues? And so then they, you know, that gives them a little bit of a wiggle room then from the functional neurological disorder. But yeah, unfortunately, Prof. Arne Burkhardt was the chap who did those post-mortems, and he's now not with us. So there's a worrying trend about dissenting doctors and sudden death, actually. So I've got my will in order.
I know we had John O'Looney on, and obviously, you know, he is able to see the problems he's having is when he's doing the embalming. They're unable to get the fluid through on the bodies for the embalming, and then all of a sudden they're pulling this white pasta-like substance out of the bodies of people that shouldn't be there. You know, and it's obvious that these blockages is the cause of the death, but it's not what it's saying on the death certificate, unfortunately. It's, you know, they're putting it down as maybe a heart attack or a stroke, which, you know, could be the secondary effect of what these blockages are. But the things that he was showing us and what he was pulling out, just absolutely unbelievable. You know, it's almost like a huge rubbery plaque building within the body. And some of these things are several feet long that he's pulling out of the arteries of people. It's just absolutely unbelievable. There's no denying.
And again, there's two ways of looking at that. I mean, what are they? Firstly, where's the clamour of people, interested pathologists who want to know? And then there's the people who don't want to look into it. Well, why don't you want to look into it? Why don't you want to know what these things are that are killing your patients? It's just, again, it's a look the other way mentality amongst my colleagues that I can't explain. I don't know how to snap them out of it. I really don't, other than keep begging them to think about, I've even tried to use the camera, the camera. We are working together as comrades here. I mean, you're letting your colleagues, the reason I'm in the situation I'm in and other colleagues have been suspended is because you guys are all silent approach, man down, and if you're in the military, you taught us, so if a man's down, you go and pick him up and you work together to get him to safety.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the medical fraternity just they don't just cut you adrift, they actively attack you. It's very easy to get me on TV tomorrow and debunk me if I'm talking nonsense and conspiracy theories. Well, A, show me the misinformation, and B, rebut me with the data, the remedial data. But in the last 3 years I've spoken out, not a conversation like that at all. Yeah. It's like childish behaviour on the playgrounds. If it's not the internet trolls on Twitter, it's professional colleagues. Even yesterday, I was sent a group of doctors that were chatting about me again. Didn't have the balls to speak to me personally, but this was a massive number of patients in a room called On Call Room. I'm going to name them On Call Room on Facebook, and they put my video up saying, "Have you all seen this?" And you should have seen from a group of doctors who were supposed to be professional people. I got called all sorts, from a wanker to mentally unstable, and this doctor really wants to get struck off. I'll drive into the GMC building myself. And the video is basically me just saying, this is what I've seen in clinic. Can we all speak out about our observations? Ask people how many vaccines they've had, and they're just saying. I quoted a dilated cardiomyopathy in a patient that developed a heart issue after being a marathon runner, funnily enough, as you were just mentioning. And all they were saying, well, that happens before COVID. That happened. People got DCM. Well, why does it keep happening? I keep saying, how rare is rare got to be?
Yeah.
Until it becomes common. It's just an insane amount of coincidences. That's the only other way to explain it. And I don't know.
It's amazing that all these people have taken an oath to do no harm and to do what's best for the patients, and still they're falling very, very short of the mark in regards to the care that they're giving. As you say, they should be the ones sounding the alarm. They should be the ones saying, hey, I took this oath, to do no harm, and patients come first, and everything I'm seeing here is telling me that there's a problem, there's something wrong, and they're ignoring it and going.
Well, it's not just the oath. It's not just the oath and the vocational wish to be a doctor. I got asked this morning, why did you become a doctor? To help people, to care for their health, their holistic approach to their healthcare. And these doctors are not only ignoring the reason that they became doctors, but I don't know. It's a professional misconduct for me. I'm having to use, in my defence for the GMC case, the fact that they're holding that down as social media misbehaviour. From me, I'm being accused. They're calling things such as me calling out lies, and I'll explain a couple of those in a minute. Calling out liars on TV is being called bullying, harassment, and online incitement of hatred towards colleagues when they're telling porkies, and I'll give you a couple of examples. But the point I was trying to make is, we've got things like the GMC Good Medical Practice Guidance. We've got the GMC Duty of Candour. We've got the GMC's Informed Consent and Confidentiality Guidance, which I'm following by the letter of the law. They're throwing things that, like, you've got to be kind to colleagues, and it works both ways. They're saying I'm being unkind to colleagues when it's a 10-to-1 ratio of abuse in my direction. Me being called a bully, a harasser, and inciter of hatred is insanity. When you see, anyone who follows me on Twitter will see it's 24/7. And I've had some from even the complainants that have cried wolf that I'm bullying and harassing them. But I've called out claims. Like, one particular person said that in January 21 that the vaccine was 100% safe in pregnancy, was the same as the influenza and pertussis jab. Now, these are demonstrable lies, and it doesn't take a lot to prove that they're lies. Somebody saying that one jab gives you 100% protection from death from COVID-19 and hospitalisation for COVID-19. Even at the beginning, that was rubbish. Even the trial data didn't show that. So, it's going to be fun to have this discussion in the public eye. So I'm actually quite looking forward to the GMC hearing. So.
Yeah. The likes of the GMC and other authorities within the medical system, are they, basically outright asking doctors and medical professions to keep quiet about what they are seeing?
Not directly, but I think everyone, it's like the unwritten rule. Everyone knows that there's a code of silence. You know, everyone knows that whistleblowing policies in the NHS are a joke, because if you do blow your whistle, you can collect your P45 at the door. You know that's a kind of the unwritten rule to keep in line. Even my own appraiser a couple of years ago said, what you should have really done, Dave, fair play for speaking out, and you should always be encouraged to, around safety. But what you really do when you work in the NHS, you need to follow consensus opinion, was the phrase he used. And secondly, he said, really, you should have kept your head down and shrugged your shoulders. Well, I'm sorry about that. You're in the wrong job, Doc, if you're saying you should shrug your shoulders at safety signals. So, and this is a senior doctor in the area. So, yeah, the GMC, who regulates the regulator, is the question I've got. Is my Twitter activity in the jurisdiction of a GMC regulation? No, it should be about patient safety. You know, if I'm Harold Shipman, come after me. I mean, my trial is going to be 15 days. Yeah. They've told me, and it's took them 28 months to get to that position. 28 months. You don't treat humans like that.
No.
You know, you don't treat a dog like that, let alone a professional human being. And 15 days, I've got a book out in October to go to Manchester, GMC HQ, and represent myself. I don't think murderers get that amount of trial time, do they?
That's it. But the truth is the truth. It can't be denied. And at the end of the day, all these doctors and authorities within the medical system, the more people that continue to die, the more people that wake up to exactly what's going on, it's going to get to a point further down the line where this is absolutely undeniable. And those that have continued to push this in regards to the unfavorable things for the likes of yourself and other doctors and medical staff and the lies that are being told, they're going to be held accountable for this. Are they not seeing that far down the line that the day of reckoning is actually coming for them?
This is the sweet paradox, isn't it? That the careers they're trying to protect by staying silent, they're going to lose anyway, because as the public wake, and I tell you now, the group in the middle, I've always said they're the original red pillars who were awake from the start, never took it, awake to all the facets of the COVID ball. And then you've got the ones that are going to jab until they've got to jab 20 and jab anything with a pulse. But what we're seeing now is the group in the middle that are being personally affected, and they're coming to me now, and they're coming to me for advice because they've gone to their own doctors, and the doctors have shrugged them off and gaslit them and told them it's nothing to do with the vaccine. That it's not me that's put the idea in their head. They've said, look, I've not been right since that third, fourth, fifth vaccine, and I've developed this plethora of symptoms. No one's helping me. And then somebody says, oh, you need to speak to that Dr. Cartland guy. You know, he's one of the only ones. And this is what I'm saying. And when you actually speak to them, they're angry. They're really angry people, and righteous anger. And they're not very happy with the lies that they were told. I'm not very happy with the lies I was told, you know. I was coerced into having mine, heavily coerced, and I was going to lose my job if I didn't take it. I mean, I'm fuming at the vaccinator, the actual injector, who doesn't speak to me, funnily enough, and has blocked me, even though she injected me and subjected me to the chronic effects later on down the line. So people are going to get angry towards their vaccinator. They're going to get angry at their local NHS surgeries. And, you know, they've got to expect those consequences. I'm not inciting anything here, by the way. I'm just saying that people are going to be angry. It's going to naturally happen. People are going to want to seek justice for the perpetrators of this. And silence, unfortunately, and as we found with Nuremberg, I get a lot of jip for talking about the Nuremberg Code. The reason I talk about the Nuremberg Code is because that's as valid as it today as it is tomorrow. I'm not saying we hang in the doctors and nurses. I'm saying that there's a code from that period of time where the excuse of, I'm just following orders, you know, they told me to do it. Because what happens there is that the people on the shop floor, the volunteers even, that were vaccinating, said, oh, we're doing it because the nurses have told us. Nurses say we're doing it because the doctors told us. Doctors because the bosses of the local LMC told us. Up the chain to the NHS, to the government. And then you got the very top, the pharmaceutical industry, who quite conveniently took an immunity from prosecution. So they pass the blame back down and down and down. And it goes, do you know where it's going to? It's going right back down. And you saw that with Rishi Sunak this week, where John Watt confronted him. First thing that came out of his mouth in rebuttal, oh, well, we were just doing what the doctors told us to. We're just politicians. I mean, what do you want us to do? We just followed the specialists, the doctors. So there's a bus that they're being thrown under. And it's the time to speak is now, because they're going to throw you under the bus if not. So time to defend yourself and defend that career that you're so protective over, because you're going under that bus otherwise. So.
Yeah, no, that's it. We know what's coming. We know what's on the cards. It's just a matter of time. And, you know, if those that want to save face, they need to start speaking out now. Because the more that start to speak out now, it'll bring it to a head. And at least if they're speaking out, they're not going to be held. It's possible to be held accountable, but at least they will see the errors of their ways, and hopefully that'll sort it. Now, what I want to ask as well, the flu jab is something that, many people get every year. Now, there was talk about this becoming an mRNA shot or a combination shot with the COVID vax. Did that actually come out?
Not yet. I know they're heavily into producing it. I mean, look, ultimately it comes down to the fact that not only is pharma already a multi-billion industry, multi-trillion industry, I don't know how these psychopaths would even want even more money when they're so rich, but even so, they want even more money. This is a multi-billion pound industry, mRNA. We've seen it already, sweet irony. This is what pharmacy do. They want to keep you sicker and sicker and sicker. It's a business model. So, the mRNA has caused all these autoimmune conditions, myocarditis, turbo cancers. Guess what's in the pipeline? Treatments for myocarditis, turbo cancers, and they're mRNA based. So there's a lot of money riding on this horse here.
Yeah.
And it needs to win the race. So people like Dr. Cartland coming along and putting up a defence that it's not safe and not effective is a big spanner in a multifaceted, multi-million, billion, quadrillion pound business. So, going back to the mRNA and the flu jab, it will come. It will come. At the moment, they're quite happy to just give one in each arm at the moment without any clinical evidence of safety in co-administration. But evidence-based medicine was 2019 and before. It's out of date now.
Yeah. And again, the media have been really hyping up the fact that King Charles is stepping down for his duties for a while due to cancer, but there is a vaccine coming for cancer. Do we know if this is going to be mRNA based, or is it just kind of in the
as soon as I hear mRNA, I just run a mile. I don't look anymore. I just think the whole thing's failed at the first hurdle. We've got to put our hands up now, and with the duty of candor, rebuild the trust. And again, as I mentioned, there is that guidance. If any GPs are in doubt about it, go to the GMC website. It's called the duty of candor, and do what you're supposed to do. It's not an opt-in and an opt-out, but going back to of course, there's going to be an mRNA-based, solution to the problem, and watch King Charles get better suddenly, and that's a great advert for the old promotion of the new mRNA technology. I don't know if he was vaccinated or not, but if he has got cancer and that's genuine, is that mRNA-induced cancer? Because that's one of the big things I'm seeing at the moment, and it's heartbreaking, and it really upsets me. Outside of the kids and the pregnancy, it's the young people that are dying in their 30s with rare, aggressive, metastatic diagnosis. They're on palliative care in their early 30s. The oncologists are telling me this. You're seeing cancers that you don't see in the cohort, so you don't see 30-year-olds with metastatic breast cancer. Saw one 2 weeks ago. Gastric cancer in a 30-year-old, 2 kids, days and weeks to live. Again, 31-year-old, and had multiple jabs. That's the one correlation between all of them. You're not seeing these. I mean, we get the mickey taken out of us for saying turbo cancer. That's not even a thing. Well, I beg to differ. Speak to your pathologists. Speak to the oncologists. The oncologists know that there's a spurt in cancers in young people. The latest one I signed off work with Stress said, confirmed that with me. And she did say she was baffled as to the reason, and I enlightened her. And you could see that the light bulb hadn't even pinged until after I mentioned that. I said, you don't think it could be the COVID jab? I said the gene therapy to start with, and she said, what do you mean gene therapy? Because they don't even know it's mRNA based even now in 2024. I said, like the COVID jabs that we've given to the whole world. And they turn around and say, what do you mean gene therapy, COVID jabs? And then I pull up, the product literature from Pfizer, Moderna onto the website, and then they read it off, and it says it's a gene immunomodulatory therapy, and it's not to be classed as a vaccine in their own words. And then she's like, oh, well, I didn't think about that. Oh, maybe I'll ask my patients in the future how many they've had. I said, I suggest you do. It's too late for them now, but.
That's it. My wife, she's got a friend in Australia that she went to school with. And, she's really sick, in and out of hospital. And it seems to be the common thing that's being said. I've heard it quite a few times where they're just saying, we don't know what's wrong with you. And now whether that's an excuse because they probably do know what the cause is, but to just turn around to somebody and say, we do not know what's wrong with you, should ring alarm bells massively.
Yeah, and it brings us back to that point about being thrown under a bus. You got a chance to speak. There's a small window. Do it now. I implore you to, because your job ain't going to be there. You're going to be replaced by AI anyway. Artificial intelligence is coming, so you may as well speak out. And at least it would only take, for example, MPs. MPs. I know from what Andrew said, that there are an ever-growing number of MPs tapping him on the shoulder, saying, keep up the good work. We know loads of people that are sick from it, but 10 of them, they could become heroes overnight if 10 of them stood up and said, I stand with Andrew Bridgen because X, Y, and Z, and we've got neighbours dropping like flies and friends dropping like flies. Same with doctors. It'd only take 10 from one hospital, and then it would start to build a movement then in that locality. We just need numbers, and
I mean,
sadly,
if enough doctors come together in a hospital and said we're going to make a stand, and everyone was in agreement, this can't go on any longer, they can't get rid of them all, because then the hospital would have to close. And then that would.
It's a whole reason they dropped the mandate, wasn't it? Because it wasn't because it was a sense of it's the wrong thing to do and it's unscientific, but it was all about, we can't afford to lose all these 100,000 doctors. They weren't messing around, were they? Because they did it to the carers. They sacked them. So that was fresh in my mind when I made my decision to take the second one. Was they're not messing about here. They're actually going to, and they were telling the people, you're going to have to empty your desk on, Monday, whenever the date was. They were going to bring the mandate in. So
yeah.
Now, it's been crazy times. I can't explain it all.
Matt Hancock's no longer there after his groping incidents and having his time on Celebrity Island. But are we still seeing an overuse of midazolam?
Again, it's not my area of expertise, really. I hear the same as probably you do about, the spikes in deaths that literally you can overlay the graphs, can't you, about, the midazolam scripts that were actioned, as well as the spikes in the deaths in the nursing homes, for example. So, we can but speculate, but, we're in a situation where somebody can drop dead after a vaccine and it's nothing to do with the vaccine. So we're never going to pin this on midazolam and overuse. I've seen it with my own eyes. I don't know what's going on at the moment because I'm out of practice, but I saw, that they were going to, in the pandemic peak, as it were, all these old uns were just being signed off, written off. Yeah. That's all I can call it. They were written off. And even this last 3 months, we were going around to places and signing forms for people who we believe just won't be here in 3 months. We'd be surprised if they were, because they're demented or they're in nursing homes. And you'd fill in forms such as a TEP form, which is a treatment escalation plan, and you'd make a decision about the patient. That was going on back at the start of the pandemic, and without the patient's knowledge, you were kind of almost signing the red form, which is do not attempt resuscitation, do not send this patient to hospital, just give antibiotics. And then alongside those 3 decisions came what they call anticipatory medication. So then they'd sling a load of drugs at the nursing home and say, if she starts getting a bit rattly and she's not responding to amoxicillin, whack up the syringe driver, bam. And they were using industrial strength doses, increasing the doses incrementally till death. And that's where the midazolam deaths come from. It was an overzealous use of what they call anticipatory drugs, end-of-life pathways, on people that weren't end of life. They just had a ceiling drawn on their treatment of do not send to hospital. Obviously, if they're not responding to amoxil, then the drugs rolled in on the syringe driver, or stat doses. I mean, they were giving elephant tranquilizing doses to little old dears that had like 40 kilogram body weights. Just incredible. I've seen the drug charts myself.
Now, are children still being encouraged to take these shots without the parents' consent? And do you think a child would actually be mature enough to understand informed consent? And is this now being given?
Yeah, I mean, going back right to the start, I mean, the kids were being given it on the false premise anyway. They were being given it to protect their granny. And, when we knew Pfizer had already said that it doesn't stop transmission. I've been saying even today, if you're vaccinated and it works, then it doesn't matter what you do or I do, you're protected. So, let people live their lives. But going back to the children, obviously, one of the things that alarmed me and got me to speak out was the fact they were going for younger and younger cohorts. And they went right the way down to 6-month-olds in the UK. I think, and again, I'm not completely up to date because I've been out of the NHS in that respect for some time. I've had my little 3-month stint and just went in, did my work and got out. Yeah. But essentially, I think there's still kids involved in the guidance, the current guidance, if they've got immunosuppressed family members, for example. Again, the premise of protecting your relative rather than protecting the child. Again, with the absence of any pre-rollout safety data. Yeah. Children weren't tested on the same as pregnant women weren't. So to say that it's safe in kids and pregnant women is a lie. Simple as that. Fraud. It's blatant fraud. So, yeah, to give it to kids was one of the most evil things that our profession's done in the whole pandemic. Yeah. It's sickening. I mean, it's unjustifiable. There was no necessity. It was based on a false premise of don't transmit to your granny. And at the same time, what did we do to kids? We locked them down. We kicked them out of school, put the fear of God into them, turned them into germphobes. And I'm seeing I'm seeing the result of that in my clinics where, You know, people, young kids, even 7 or 8 year olds, are saying things about suicide. And you know, you ask parents, when did they start talking about suicide and harming themselves? Oh, well, it's just after the lockdown. The phrase is always the same. Oh, well, just after lockdown, she got really anxious and stressed, and she wasn't quite herself, and she started cutting herself. And it's like, we're talking about kids under 10 here. The same kids are trying to sexualize as well.
Yeah,
Just
that's
insane.
that's a whole episode right there, just on that one topic alone. And
Yeah.
autoimmune disorders, we're seeing a massive increase in autoimmune disorders. Has it been proven yet that the safe and effective will actually diminish the immunity within people? And is this, very likely the cause of a lot of deaths where people just can no longer fight off the diseases and the illnesses that are coming to them?
Yeah, that's the second wave of pathology. So if you think about it, I'll go back to first principle. So what we're giving is this massive number of infectious units. If it's the AstraZeneca, essentially it's a way of getting the mRNA into the cell. So once you've got the mRNA in the cell will decode the mRNA and produce the spike protein construct, or the alleged spike protein construct. What's that going to do? This is Frankenstein medicine here. We're getting a human cell to make a non-human construct protein. What's that going to do? It's going to be carnage in the human body. And I've talked about 4 different pathophysiological mechanisms. Number 1 is the VAIDS, vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, and that's what you've just touched on. I'm seeing people who had 4 or 5 jabs this winter in particular, incessantly unwell. They're catching every infection that's going. It's taking them weeks and weeks and weeks and loads of antibiotics, etc., to get better. They're 2 steps forward, 1 steps back. And then you've got weird reactivations. We're seeing shingles coming back. We're seeing people with Bell's palsy again. You see one Bell's palsy in your career. I mean, Bell's palsy is as common now, and they're all vaccinated. It's not difficult to through that. So their immune system. So I've talked about VAIDS, vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. I'm seeing that in people's blood tests. So these people who are intractably unwell, you look at their full blood counts, and they've got low lymphocyte counts, which fight viruses. You've got low neutrophils, which fight bacteria. You've got low monocytes, which do a bit of both. And then you've got high eosinophil counts. And this is kind of almost what I'm saying, without fully auditing it formally. The eosinophil count is there to show that the body's under a chronic inflammatory reaction. It's to do with histamine and allergy and inflammation. That's what those cells do. And so we're seeing that in the full blood counts. And then leaning into the other pathophysiology, we know it's affecting endothelial dysfunction, which is the blood vessel lining, which kind of opens and closes perfusion to tissues. We know it's causing microvascular clotting, like little bullets firing off into tissues and brains, willy-nilly and unnoticeable because people will just fire off a little clot, knock out a bit of brain tissue, knock out a bit of liver tissue. And that's all because of the procoagulant effect of making spike protein by the human endothelial cells. And then you've got the autoimmunity, as you touched on. And it's really simple. It's not difficult. Doctors don't realize this, but my window cleaner does. That making a human cell, make a non-human protein, the body's going to attack the cell. That's what autoimmunity is. And so an absolute explosion of a variety of autoimmune conditions. And what I'm telling people to do now when they're being gaslit, go and get your anti-nuclear antibody done, go and get your auto antibody screen done, and then they can't tell you that it's functional and you're making it up because those tests are on the whole positive. So it's and then you've got prion disease. These proteins have got to go somewhere. They don't just disappear in a puff of air. They deposit in the tissues, and that's what Professor Arne Burkhardt was looking at. It was depositing in heart tissue, brain tissue, testicular tissue. So it's depositing in people's brains as we speak. Yeah. So, it's serious stuff, this, prion disease. I mean, they're calling it prion disease. I mean, as I said, this is not a Dave Cartman conspiracy theory. Go to Google Scholar, go to PubMed, type in COVID-19 vaccine and variant CJD, or COVID-19 vaccine and prion disease. Fill your boots with the articles that are published in case series. It's not Dave Cartman's conspiracy theory. And that's published, peer-reviewed.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit earlier as well about obviously the changes with the doctors. I mean, we've seen people's personalities change. I'm seeing people with a blank look. There's just nothing behind the eyes going on. It's almost like, you can see that they're suffering these cognitive problems. It's almost like Alzheimer's. This is young people. This isn't just old people. Are you finding that there's a lot more young people again with cognitive problems?
Yeah, and that's borne out in the referrals to memory clinic. Even in my 3-month stint, loads and loads of 30 to 40-year-olds, even myself when I was, jabbed and down the line, some months down the line, whether it was stress, there's lots of confounders, but I will say that, since I've been using detox regimes, it's so much better.
Yeah.
So, I was getting brain fog, memory issues, slurring my words. I was aggressive sometimes, like really edgy and anxious. And so I felt that in myself. But again, patients walking in the 30s saying, "Doc, really worried. I can't remember. I'm repeating myself. My missus tells me I'm repeating myself all the time. Told her a story, then I tell her it again an hour ago." And again, that's what Alzheimer's is. It's a multi-infarct dementia picture. People getting microclots firing off with the prion disease and vasculitis of the brain. These are the sort of three areas whereby there is a plausible mechanism for what we're seeing. And I think everyone would agree, not just people on our side. If you asked 100 random people, have you been cognitively impaired since the jab or feel differently versus do you know anyone whose personality's changed or memories lapsing or, you've noticed new confusion in your sort of younger relatives? And they would all say yes.
Yeah.
They would all say that. I would bet my house on that.
Yeah, through a friend of mine. I mean, we were aware of a doctor. He was one of the world's best eye surgeons, and leading up, after the first year, he was saying that he was seeing microclotting in the eyeballs of all the patients that have taken a shot. Because his practice was so big, because his surgery, was in such demand, he, in order to keep his business and keep everything running, had to take the shots himself. He's no longer with us. He died suddenly, just to please these authorities and follow the rules and regulations that they were putting in. So not only has a man lost his life, a family have lost a father. There's also, probably one of the best eye surgeons in the world is no longer available because this system absolutely failed him. And he was afraid to speak out. He'd mention it without being officially mentioning it, that these microclots were going on behind the eyeballs. But unfortunately, he suffered the consequences of his silence. And, I really wish he would have come out and said things earlier, but he was in more fear of losing his practice and what he did. He absolutely loved his job. But this is, again, a perfect example of what many doctors, surgeons, and medical staff are going through, that they are, so much in fear of losing everything they've worked for in their lives. And I understand it in a way, but when we see consequences at this level, is it really worth trying to hide?
Yeah, the stakes are high, and that's a classic vignette that you've just given us. There's many cases like that where people have took it for the wrong reason. The biggest one I hear 90% of the time is I had to travel for work, or I needed it for work. Yeah. So, your basic human rights to move around the country and the world, as well as your right to work, were being taken off you with absolutely no science behind it. And people were having to take a jab, talk about coercion and invalid informed consent, that they were taking it, and like you say, they no longer live to tell the tale. Now, unfortunately, I think that's where the critical mass is going to be reached, that enough doctors are going to have to, unfortunately, keep getting jabbed and collapse and die, and funeral after funeral and eulogy after eulogy being read out in hospitals. And unfortunately, that it's either that or speak out now and stop it, and stop taking jabs, and let's break the dam together. It's not good. You can't choose between them, and the stakes are high. And I agree with you, Chris. It's a multifactorial aspect to why people are silent. The careers are built up. We talked earlier about the sort of slavery of debt and maintaining a certain lifestyle, and kids in private school, the complicity of taking it as well. But the fear, how have we garnered this culture of fear in the NHS, where we're so-called freedom to speak up guardian, as we talked about earlier, that people are petrified to speak? How have we allowed that to penetrate the healthcare service, whereby I'm being told to keep my head down and shrug my shoulders, and this guy's too petrified? And he's not the first ophthalmologist that would be privately tapping me on the shoulder, saying we're seeing loads of retinal vein occlusions, seeing loads of hemorrhages of retinas, seeing loads of retinal detachments. And this is, again, that's one of the areas that you don't see in the press. If you type in COVID vaccine and ophthalmology, they say quite the opposite. But unfortunately, from anecdote and taps on the shoulder, I don't believe that to be the case. The amount of ophthalmologists, if they all banded together and said what they were seeing down their fundoscope, that it would end it. And people care about their eyesight, people care about their hearts. It only takes all the cardiologists to say. Hematologists, where are they? Where are the hematologists? Where are the midwives and the obstetricians? Only this week, 2 weeks ago, should I say, I had the chance meeting with 2 midwives in my surgery, and both of them told me they're working in the exact same hospital, of what they're seeing in their department. And I can't explain why at that level, we're talking about unborn babies and their mothers here in, giving birth. They're seeing the moms going downhill fast, having heart issues and blood clots. They're seeing babies taken from normal vaginal delivery straight to the neonatal unit with a multitude of issues. One of the ladies said it was they're seeing babies born and they're undergrown and they're what's called syndromic. Placentas being pulled out of women in the third stage of labour that are just not normal placentas. They're calcified and blue and dusky and coming out in great chunks, are having retained products of conception, having to be removed surgically, crash sections galore. I'm saying, is anyone going to speak out? We're talking about kids, babies here, unborn babies in the first hour of life. If that's not enough to trigger you, and the best I got was, well, I'll help you with an audit, I'll get some figures together and give them to you. For me to take the sting for them, it's like I can't conceive how that people can get to that position and then still get up in the morning the next day and work in get their midwife's tunic on. I just can't.
No, I know. What? We've asked the questions as well. We've got people that we know, that are senior midwives and lecturers. And, I'd already seen enough evidence. There was a lot coming out of Australia a couple of years ago showing the percentages of miscarriages. We're seeing people, again, just social media is incredible for seeing, oh, such and such died. Sorry, this is passing. Oh, I feel terrible. We've lost the baby and whatever. There's so much out there. And, when you actually ask them, they're turning around and saying, oh, no, we're not seeing it. Like, you must be. Are they just?
Well, they're lying, Chris. They're lying. All you need to do, go to reproductive VARs, go into Google, type in reproductive VARs, and you'll see, across the last 20, 30 years, the miscarriage rates going up, the postpartum hemorrhages going up, every kind of complication, everything but the last 2 years recorded off the top of the scale of the graph, whereas it's been bobbling around zero or low numbers for the last X amount of years. So, what will it take to wake these people up? And I did have humility as a Christian, but we're talking about kids dying here and giving jabs, lying to patients, but barefaced lying. So humility is wearing thin now, as well as not just letting me go about my business, but attacking me and putting me in the firing line for being struck off. The blasphemous views I've got.
We were told an amazing story the other day. We were talking with a gentleman who's a commissioner for the National Citizens Inquiry in Canada, and he was telling us that somebody came forward and it was a vaccination station where people were queuing up to go in for the vaccines, and a lady took the shot, immediately fell on the floor, and she died literally in view of everyone within this vaccination station where they were queuing up. Nobody left the queue.
I knew you were going to say that. I mean, if that was me, I would be dispersed. I'd be out the building. I would not go anywhere near that. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. If I come up to you in the street with a syringe and I jab it in your arm and you drop down dead there and then, I'd expect the cuffs to be snapped onto me within seconds and arrested. What was in that syringe? Except if you're in a COVID vaccine centre. And then you're literally getting away with murder. Why are these people not being arrested? I was going to say that they need to be arrested because somebody's got to take the blame here. And if it's not the person who pressed the syringe, I don't know who it is.
Really. It will eventually get to that point, and this is why, as you said earlier, people need to speak out now, because if they don't speak out now, there'll be a knock on the door, and there'll be police officers there, and they'll say, Mrs. Such and Such, we believe that you administered so many shots to so many people. We've got this here and we need to take you in for further questioning. This is going to happen eventually once the tides turn, once it becomes undeniable. What I wanted to ask you about as well, I've been noticing it, and a lot of people have seen online, and again, people that have spoken to locally. Have you been noticing a long-term cough with people that they just can't get rid of?
Yeah, absolutely. That's been the story of the winter, really an early autumn peak, really it was. And people coming to me through my drcarton.com service and also in that 3-month sampling of the NHS. And intractable coughs. And yeah, I think it entered the media at the same time as the measles peak and all the fear mongering there, etc. The same thing here, this 100-day cough, which used to be called pertussis. But again, what that feeds again into pathophysiology. We know these latent infections, that's what shingles is. It's a latent infection that reactivates when your immune system isn't working very well. So, this is another indication that AIDS is actually a real thing, and people are sick because their immune systems can't cope with the infection. It's just incredible. And again, I mean, we won't go into the science here of antibody-dependent enhancement and leaky vaccines and escape variants, but this was part of the plan. It's basic virology. If you create a leaky vaccine, you just keep getting escape variants continually. Perfect business model. And then over time, your immune system just becomes depleted and gives up. So, you know, we're 3 or 4 years into this now. 4 years, is it? I don't know when it all started now. And I've never heard of a pandemic lasting 4 years. Have you?
No.
I've heard of business models that have a plan of 4 years, but yeah,
which it probably could be.
Yeah, but yeah, we're seeing loads of people, like I say, whether it's pertussis or not, we're not doing the proper tests as far as I'm concerned. They're just lobbing antibiotics, and it does tend to improve with the antibiotics that you would use for pertussis. So.
Let's talk about the situation you're facing. Let's talk about the backlash you've been receiving. There's been court cases. There's been people coming at you for things, saying it's slander if you speak out against them. You know, what's your current position? Because this has been a really rough ride for you, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. I hope there is light at the end of the tunnel, but can you tell us what you've had to go through and what you're still facing?
Yeah, that's another 2-hour interview, but I'll keep it brief. I mean, look, the reason I left this job recently is it's unsafe to practice there, because I was operating in 10-minute appointments, you know, 35, 40 times a day. My lunch break was a visit to see the sickest of the community. That was my lunch break, going and seeing them on a home visit. So it's not fit for purpose anyway, but I can't work amongst people who are jabbing people and not taking the jab themselves. That's what it came down to for me. They're about to launch the booster. But in terms of the situation I am in with the GMC, I've got to be a bit careful about how I disclose things, but essentially the process is there to punish. That's all I can say, really. Yeah, that I've been, you know, 18 months it took them to make a decision. Again, they made it last for another Christmas, so 2 Christmases. GMC like to send you emails at 5 to 5 on a Friday evening, telling you about more complaints, you know. And bearing in mind, I'm being hung out to dry. I've just had a rejection. I'm not a snitch, but when people give me death threats, and that feeds into some of the answer here of some of the hell I'm facing. A consultant from the Midlands said he was going to come down to the area and rip my effing throat out, or words to that effect. Sent it to the GMC. Doesn't reach our threshold for investigation. Actually told the guy that it was me who reported him. So they didn't. Where's the patient safety there? I mean, the GMC have been awful in terms of my direct ability to work in the area now. I mean, the GMC, again, based on the accusations of others, I've not been able to give a defence. I was allowed to give a written rebuttal, whereas the people who've accused me were given oral statements. So even that in and of itself is not fair. At the point where I gave my oral statement and no one's made a decision guilty or not guilty, they send a letter out to every surgery I've worked at in the last 6 months to tell them that, just by FYI, your doctor, your locum, Dr. Dokan's been accused of A, B, C, and D. Talk about guilty till proven innocent. And now that, I mean, I've given them smoking guns for all 3 complainants now, saying, look, you know, this is a smoking gun with fingerprints of them bullying me and harassing me. You know, and they're ignoring it. They're just adding it to their bundle, as they keep saying. It's like, no, you need to throw this out. This is having a deleterious effect on my mental health, because it's like Chinese torture. 28 months until the day I get to speak. And then, you know, 10 months worth of me paying for litigation and barristers and lawyers. Like I say, the process is that, and I'm innocent. I know that. The GMC know that.
Yeah.
I can't believe the people have got the audacity to proceed with this, because the demonstrable lies, they need to justify it in that courtroom. But as I said, it's a 15-day trial. Murderers don't get 15-day trials, and it's just draining. Honestly, it really is, because you know I've stood up for ethics.
Is it the GMC's courtroom? Is it like a kangaroo court? And that, you know, is it any way that this it can ever be taken to a proper court of law where they are answerable to a judge? And where
well, they're subject to their own regulations. I mean, this is what I keep asking the GMC: where is this not a regulatory overreach here? You know, refereeing Twitter spats. You know, he called me that, he called me that back. You know, they've got me for harassment at the moment. But you know, the last time I looked in the dictionary, if I'm calling you names all day long, Chris, and you don't respond and say, please, can you stop doing that? And I keep doing it, that's called harassment, unwanted. You know, but if you call me the names back tenfold over, 100 times over, 1,000 times over, you wouldn't have the audacity to report me for harassment at that point, would you?
No.
That's what, in a nutshell, that's the case against me. as well as transphobia. I mean, the transphobia is things like asking people if, kids being around men in dildo-clad sexual wear in the middle of Pride marches is appropriate for kids to be around. That's what the GMC have filed under. Dr. Carpenter showing hostility to the LGBTQ plus community. No, I'm asking, should kids be around men in fetish wear, dressed as dogs, stroking them on the snout? And other things such as there was a crucifixion of Jesus, and there was a man feigning masturbation in the face of Jesus. No, you wouldn't do. What's that achieving? And my questions were, what is this? Can anyone explain how any filed under the Dr. Carpenter's being transphobic banner? So this is what I'm facing. I mean,
transphobic. This is people's sexual preferences, and basically they're a bunch of perverts, and it's something that nobody should be taking the kids to see as entertainment whatsoever.
But at the same time, we've got kids being taught at school, and the World Health Organization are trying to teach 9-year-olds to touch themselves and ask what it's like. Ask daddy what it's like to orgasm. I mean, and you stand up for that, and you become a transphobe or some sort of phobe nowadays. And
well, no, you just encourage it further, and up until the point that they think it's okay to legalize pedophilia or something like that. And that's exactly where this sick and twisted group of, what are these, Satan worshippers or something? It's absolutely unbelievable.
No comment. I don't want to get myself in trouble, but that's probably about. So I mean, literally, I look forward to October. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and the thing is, the truth is the truth. A lie can be twisted and changed, but the truth will always remain the truth. And I think when you get there, the truth is there. Well documented, undeniable. Hopefully this will be the end of it, and this can be something that can be a turning point, not only for you, but for a lot of other people out there who have gone through very similar circumstances, and hopefully it will encourage a lot more people to speak out and push further forward within that. And I think that's where we're at with it now. So
unfortunately, the dampener I'm going to put on that is everyone who has spoken out and watching drop like flies as they're suspended and having their license taken off them and restricted practice. Meanwhile, I look in the Daily Rag and find out GPs that have been having sex with their patients and prescribing morning after pills get suspensions for 6 months. Doctors that are drunk on the job get 6 weeks suspension, and plenty of TLC because of the stress of the environment. I mean, I read out at my initial meeting at the tribunal the other day, there was like I felt like I was being set up for a murder trial, all the legal spiel and all the rest of it. But the one thing I did read out was a very damning statistic. 26 doctors, forgive me if that's off by 1 or 2, have committed suicide during their GMC investigation, guilty or innocent. They killed themselves because the process was so stressful and the support is just not there. They'll tell you to ring a listening ear. I did that, and I got an 8 times jabbed anaesthetist who had just had a COVID jab in one arm, flu jab in the other. So what's the point of that? And I gave them the damning statistic that I think it was the BMA or BMJ had published some research saying 1 in 3 doctors being investigated by the GMC, that's how supportive they are, feel like committing suicide and taking their life. They may not proceed with it, but 1 in 3. The GMC are an absolute disgrace to the NHS.
Let's get it on record right now, Dave, because at the end of the day, we know the dirty tactics that go on around the world with people that speak out and they try and silence them. And as you said, strange situations surrounding the death happen. And sometimes they say it's suicide. Just say to people now, listen, I'm not suicidal, never will be. And if my death ever gets, to the point where something happens to me, it needs to be fully investigated because there's probably foul play at hand. You think that's
I echo that. I mean, I've done it numerous times, and unfortunately, it's come to the point where I do. I do feel like at some point there's going to be either a physical altercation in the street by somebody, or I'm going to get bumped off. And I am not suicidal. I'll say that categorically. And it is stressful. It does take its toll, but I agree. It does need. If Dr. Carton suddenly died it's not suicide. I can promise you that. It's just such a scary situation that you have to say that. I mean, what have we come to?
But I'm glad that you're winning the battles, and I think you will win the battles. But there is a bigger war to fight, and it's going to take more people to come forward to fight that war. And I think at the end of the day, we can only encourage them. We can only say, put your fears aside and stand up for what's right, people, because this is going to weigh heavily on people's souls if they do not do that. And this is a guilt that they're going to have to carry for the rest of their lives, and it will eat away at them. It will destroy them. So come out now, speak your truth, say what you need to say, do the right thing, and that's all we can do to encourage people coming forward.
Yeah, echo that. The only thing I'll add is, and I've used this analogy a few times, it's not really an analogy. Look your children, if you're lucky enough to be blessed with children, look your children in the eye. Think about your grandchildren when you retire, your children's children, and they're going to ask you at some point in 20 years, 30 years, it took X amount of years for the thalidomide and Francis Kelsey to be absolved. So, look, when your grandkids ask you, granny, granddad, what did you do to stop this absolute carnage in 2023, 24? And they're like, well, I was just thinking about your private education. Think what you're going to tell them. You've got to fight for you. If we're not going to fight for our kids and our kids' kids, then what's the point? Why'd you get in your scrubs in the morning? Why'd you put your tunic on? Why'd you get in the car and pretend to be a doctor or nurse? Because you are pretending if you're letting this go. I just don't understand it. I really don't. Now the science is so far in our favour, there's no excuse. So yeah, look your kids in the eye tonight and explain to them in your head what you're going to say to them in the next 20 years when it all comes out. So
absolutely,
it's not emotional blackmail. This is facts. You're going to have to explain.
It's absolutely true. Yeah, people need to have a good look in the mirror at themselves and ask themselves some very serious questions. Now, before we go, I'll ask one last thing. Should people be concerned about the World Health Organization and what they are trying to push across the world in regards to the authority and control that they have over the medical systems that we use to keep ourselves fit and healthy?
Yeah, it feeds into like the one world government, doesn't it? It's a one world healthcare system that they want. So, when this disease X that they're already working on, it's in the pipeline, comes out, you can see how it's going to roll out. Yeah. They're already having their pandemic preparedness meetings, etc. They want one person at the top to disseminate a set of rules and regulations. You're going to see the mandates come back out. And if you don't take the mandate, you're going to be in prison. As simple as that. That's what they want. That's the model. Tedros says this. Tedros says jump, we say how high. If we don't, you're in Nick, and that's it. That's what it comes down to, really. That's what the whole shebang's about, And they're not just doing it with health; they're doing it with the currencies as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's all about control, and the WHO. I mean, how they think they're going to get away with this, I don't know. They'll be revolting in the streets. We need to get that spirit of protest back. We're all a bit knackered. We're all a bit battle weary. We're all a bit stressed out, but I remember right at the start that people were, were lying in the streets. I went to so many protests, megaphones and massive turnout. Everyone seems to be a little bit, we're on the precipice now where if we all start getting on the streets again, let people know. We're seeing it with the farmers. Yep. We're seeing it, we saw it back in the day with the truckers, Canadian truckers. People power. We pay these people. I hate it when patients say that to me, but it's true. We pay your wages. Give me some diazepam, but we pay MPs, we pay these people, they work for us, they're agents of us, we pay enough to them, but we need to start taking that right back. They belong to us, essentially, not the other way around.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, we at the moment, I came up with an idea of an app which puts the power back into the hands of the people in regards to politicians and those that we pay to manage the country for us, and some people now are taking this with blockchain and running with the idea. And the idea is that, people can literally see what's being brought forward in regards to policy, and they can vote immediately on the app and say yes or no. And that will go to the local MLA. And if the local member of parliament does absolutely nothing about it, then those people are held accountable and should be struck off from the position, lose anything that they were going to gain in regards to pension, and for literally not doing what their employer says, because the people are the employer of the politicians. And unfortunately, people have been lazy, sitting back and allowing them to make all these bad decisions over such a long time. We know that the likes of the pharmaceutical industries, the lobbying, the money, the whips within the party politics are controlling this to such a level now that, they think they have so much authority over the people that they just do whatever they want and tell the people, this is what you're doing. It's absolutely inverted. This is not how politics should be. They are, as you say, employees of the people. But until people take responsibility and take the power back, then nothing is going to change. But
and it all comes under, and they still call it democracy even then, despite all that what you've just said. I mean, it's just sweet irony, and ultimately it's a simple numbers game, really simple.
Yeah.
You know, how many of us and how many of them? It's very simple. That's what they're petrified about. This is why they want the subjugation and the control, because, you know, I forgot the quote now. If you control the food, you control the money, you control the energy. I think it is. Who was that now? You might be able to help me with that, but you control the people ultimately.
Yeah.
And so, you know, this is the games they play, because in numbers terms, they've got no chance whatsoever. You know, but we need to get those numbers visible rather than, you know, behind their phones and keyboard warriors and all the rest of it. We need actual people on street, outside Downing Street, you know, outside the Houses of Parliament, telling them that we don't agree with this. You know, we can't. It's, the audacity of these people is beyond words. The same at hospitals. You know, I'm not inciting people to turn up to hospitals and protest, but, you know, we need to hear more from our doctors and nurses now. You know, else people have got the right to protest.
Yeah.
You know, because people want answers. The only protest I've ever been involved in is my local surgery, and I sent a load of people down to go and ask questions, ask the vaccinators, can you tell us the safety data on children and pregnancy?
Yeah.
You know, all they were doing was they called the police, they recorded the protesters, and, you know, I keep saying there's a very easy way to appease these crazy anti-vaxxers. Give them the data, the crowds would disperse, everyone would be reassured. Jobs are good on, but they're not, because the data doesn't exist. We know that pregnancy data isn't there and the kid safety data isn't there. Never was. So, you know, this is why they hide under their desks and then start firing at me, saying I'm making them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm going to make you feel a lot more uncomfortable in the next few months.
That's it. And the power of the people is still there. You know, the people who are seeing this, you know, everybody out there that has been standing up, speaking and asking the questions, need to be asking the doctors the questions. They need to be saying to their doctors and medical staff and anybody that is pushing this on, they should be asking for the data. They should be asking for the information. And if
we've been too easy on doctors, Chris. We've been too easy. I really think we have, because I keep saying the burden of proof is on the doctor. So if you come into my room and I say, you know, this drug's safe and effective, and you say, well, can you show me some papers? You know, I might struggle in 10 minutes, but, you know, it's your right to ask that. And if I can't provide it, you've got every right then to doubt that treatment safety and efficacy. So, you know, we've been far too easy on not pinning the doctors down. That's why they've been able to get away with it, because people have just gone in and took the jab. They've not asked and said, look, well, what's actually in the vial? No, I asked that. Well, I didn't ask it, but a colleague of mine asked that question to the Royal College of GPs head person. I forgot his name now, but he said we didn't know. We can't tell patients what's in the vial because we don't know what's in it. So if I come up to you and say I've got an injection here, it's a novel gene-based therapeutic. Don't know what it does long term, because long term obviously hasn't happened. Don't even have a clue what's in the vial. Roll your sleeve up, Chris. Let me just give you 0.5 ml of it. You're not going to give it to me, are you? No. And so that's how it plays out in reality, informed consent. That, you know, and this is why I look forward to the October hearing, because people have made false claims and they've got to demonstrate the references and studies behind those claims. So it may be a trial about me, but it's going to be turned around 180. So good luck to the complainants.
Absolutely. Now we'll wrap this up. This has been absolutely incredible. As we say, we always encourage people to share this and get the information out there. But is there any key things, very important things that you wish to discuss or talk about before we finish today?
Not really. I'm tired, actually. As I said to you, I've been tired. I've been literally helping the vaccine injured all day again, and over the weekend and the week before and tomorrow. So I'm quite battle weary at the moment. But just, you know, I'm here for anyone who wants to. You know, if you're being gaslit by your doctors and people aren't taking your concerns and feelings that this is vaccine related, then even just for a listening ear, that's what I'm there for. You know, so please do get in touch, drcarton.com, and give it a plug. It's an online telemedicine. Well, I'll call it health advice and health coaching really now, just in case I get struck off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm here for you. Just keep speaking. You know, if one person tells someone else and they tell someone else, it's an exponential spread of the information. You know, and that's how we get it out in the end. So keep going, everyone, and the truth will out. And light always overcomes the dark at all times.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're all rooting for you. We want to see justice prevail. We're always there if you need to pick up the phone and talk to us, you know. So there's a lot more support out there for what you're doing than you possibly realize. The amount of people that we're seeing, and as you say, you know, you spoke to people in Australia today. There's a whole wave coming forward. We know it's an unstoppable wave. We also know what we're up against, but we will get there. We will get there. And to stand on the right side of history is something that you should be proud of, and everyone else should be proud of moving forward. So well done for that. And, you know, I really do want to see this come as a success. I know it will. It may be quite rough ride leading up to it. It may get worse before it gets better. But I think the final outcome for people and humanity is something that we're all rooting for. So thank you very much, Dave. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And we wish you all the luck. And we're all here to give you support and everything you need moving forward.
No, I appreciate that. Hopefully one day I might be the health secretary. I don't know under which government, but at least try and build back better. I've stolen that phrase.
Yeah, hopefully a government that doesn't just offer you the two-party political solution, and something that is a party of the people, for the people, and we can change the country for the better, and bring back the moral values and standards that many of our ancestors have adhered to over the centuries. And that really is what we need to bring the world back to what it needs to be, and not sliding down into this absolute depravity and darkness of where it's headed. And, you know, we do stand by you for that, Dave. That's great.
Yeah, the empire is falling, and it has got that feel, hasn't it? The empire falling.
Yes, absolutely.
But when things fall, you have to rebuild. So that's where we'll be.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, you take care, sir. Thank you very much again.
Take care. Sorry for waking you up early to do the recording.
It's all good. It's all good. It means we can get it out earlier and get it in the hands of more people. So that's always good. Well, take care.
Take care, Chris.
Keep in touch. And thank you very much again. Cheers, Dave.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.